This time, I want to look at a news story that could determine whether you live or die. Many of the world's scientists are warning that one of the best weapons we have against sickness is being pretty rapidly rendered useless, just so a few people can get richer for a while. If these people aren't stopped soon, the World Health Organization warns we're facing a, quote, doomsday scenario of a world without antibiotics, end quote. That will mean a world where transplant surgery is impossible. It'll mean a world where a simple appendix operation will be as routinely lethal as it was in 1927 before the discovery of penicillin. It'll be a world where pneumonia and TB and gonorrhea are far harder to deal with and claim a lot more of us. But crucially, it's a world that you and I don't have to see if we act on this warning now. So let me explain. As the scientists I've interviewed explain it, antibiotics do something really simple. They kill, they slow down, or they stall the growth of bacteria. They were one of the great advances of the 20th century, and they've saved millions of us. There will definitely be people listening to this podcast who are alive as a result of them. But they inherently contain a problem, one that was known about from very early on. They start an arms race, use an antibiotic against bacteria, and it kills most of it. But it can also prompt the bacteria to evolve a tougher, stronger, meaner strain that can fight back. The bacteria is constantly mutating and dividing. The stronger the antibiotic, the stronger some bacteria will become to survive. Think of it as Darwin dancing at super speed. So, the more we use antibiotics, the more we lose them. It's a battle played out on human bodies and in human wounds with sky-high stakes. In many developed countries today, MRSA, or MRSA as it's known in the United States, kills more people than AIDS. The obvious conclusion then is that we should use antibiotics really sparingly, and only when they're actually needed to treat the sick. But in one crucial area across the world, we're doing the exact opposite for the sake of a few people's profits. In the United States, Latin America and Asia, animals being farmed for meat and milk are being automatically giving antibiotics in their food all day, irrespective of whether they're healthy or sick. It's like slathering your child's cornflakes with antibiotics all year round on the off chance they get an ear infection. Some 80% of all antibiotics in the United States go straight into farm animals. Now, this speeds up the arms race massively. It's like taking bacteria to the gym and giving them a constant workout, and then unleashing them on the rest of us. You can see how this process makes bacteria stronger and tougher, and then unleashes them on us, in a really startling study by Professor Barry Levy in the New England Journal of Medicine. His team went to a chicken farm where antibiotics hadn't been used before, and they started to put the antibiotic tetracycline into their feed. Before the start of the experiment, there were no tetracycline-resistant bacteria on the farm. Within 2 weeks, 90% of the chickens, 90%, were excreting tetracycline-resistant organisms. Even more strikingly, half of all the humans living on the farm were by then excreting tetracycline-resistant bacteria too. Now, this process is happening all over the world, and it partially explains the evolution and spread of so many superbugs. Only a fortnight ago, a new strain of MRSA was found in British milk that could be transmitted to human beings. To some degree, this arms race is an inevitable part of nature. But our factory farms are massively artificially accelerating it. They're bringing the day when antibiotics won't work much closer. Now, the obvious question is why? Why would factory farms automatically feed antibiotics to healthy animals given the obvious risk? Well, if you can cram animals together, give them little room to move, and make them grow and produce far beyond the level they would in natural circumstances, they'll routinely get ill. And they do. So, it's cheaper for their owners to simply automatically and preemptively drug them all than to try to treat their illnesses individually or to create an environment where sickness is not standard. As the microbiologist Louise Slaughter, who's now in the US House of Representatives, puts it, this is, quote, an industry that is rampantly misusing antibiotics in an attempt to cover up filthy, insanitary conditions among animals, end quote. The animals in these factory farms can then become reservoirs of stronger superbugs. Now, sometimes that spreads out to us through contamination of raw meat, but much more often it's through workers who have contact with the animals. So, for example, Dutch pig farmers are 760 times more likely to be carrying pig MRSA than the rest of the population. Once you have humans carrying a resistant bacteria, it can spread wider and wider. And it's a story that ends with a world of stronger viruses and no antibiotics to fight them with, and where routine surgical operations become life-threatening once again. We always knew that factory farming was a scar on our conscience, but it turns out it's also an urgent threat to our health. Of course, factory farming isn't the only source of growing antibiotic resistance. Doctors have been overprescribing them, and some patients have too often not been taking their full course, which enables tougher bacteria to survive and thrive. But this is the most egregious cause. A few years ago, it looked like the EU had taken the lead by banning the routine use of some types of antibiotics simply to promote the growth of animals. But research published a couple of weeks ago by the Soil Association suggests farmers are sidestepping the real issue. The prescription of modern cephalosporins, the antibiotics which are most widely believed to promote stronger strains of MRSA in animals and in humans, has actually quadrupled in the past decade. Why? Well, they're advertised to farmers who are under greater pressure than ever to get more and more out of their herds, because supermarkets have ratcheted up the pressure for quick profit. The decent small farmers who want to resist these trends soon find themselves out of business. The former chief medical officer in Britain, Liam Donaldson, says this overprescription is so dangerous to us that it should be immediately banned. Yet David Cameron's government ignored the official recommendation from its own veterinary advisors to take even the much milder step of banning the advertising and promotion of antibiotics to farmers. It might seem strange that governments all over the world are taking such a gamble with public health in the face of the best scientific advice, but big agriculture has armies of lobbyists and open checkbooks, while the people trying to protect the public have only the facts and reason and truth on their side. The squandering of life-saving antibiotics is just one example of a much bigger trend that's hijacking global politics, one that I talk about so much. Small groups of rich people determined to maximise their profits are buying or bamboozling politicians into serving their interests and into ignoring the interests of you, me and the vast majority of the population. This is the trend that's making it so hard to, for example, re-regulate the banks to prevent another global crash or to prevent the unravelling of the climate. It doesn't have to be this way. The majority of the population can organise and stand together in their own self-interest and shout louder than these small, self-interested hunters of profit. There are inspiring examples of this happening all around you. In Lincolnshire, for example, there were plans to import the first US-style mega farm into this country by a group of tycoons who claimed, these quotes are real, that their cows, quote, do not belong in fields and won't want to go out, end quote. But huge public pressure forced the Environment Agency to investigate and the plans to be abandoned. Fighting back on issues like this works, and so we need to step it up. Otherwise, the history books, written by people more vulnerable to bacteria than you or I have ever been, will record something startling. Our demand for cheap meat will have turned us, in turn, into cheap meat.